You're tuned into the Growth Ceilings podcast, the show for builders, dreamers, and leaders ready to break limits and grow beyond what they thought possible.
Welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast. I'm your host, Jim Lovelady, professional EOS implementer. As most of you know, EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. This show is where leaders share the experiences that shape them and the insights that help businesses break through. My guest today is William Collins. William is a leadership advisor and organizational development coach who works with executives navigating growth, pressure, and complex transitions. His work blends psychology, communication, and leadership science to help leaders show up with clarity and confidence. William has coached senior leaders across industries and continues to guide teams towards healthier performance and more aligned cultures. William, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. And you and I share a background in the military. Thank you for your service. Your service was in the Army. My service was in the United States Air Force.
Thank to you as well.
Excellent. So you now help leaders find clarity in complex environments. What patterns do you see across executives who feel stuck?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come about when we're having conversations. One is, in many organizations, that CEO job is the loneliest position in the world, right? They don't have quote unquote peers that they can speak to. They're carrying a lot of the organization's success on their shoulders. Sometimes all of the success of that organization's on their shoulders. And sometimes they just need a sounding board to be able to think things through and to be able to kind of unpack some of their thoughts and think about how do they move the organization forward, whether that's from a strategic perspective, a tactical perspective, their team members, making sure that they have the right team in place to be able to support them, all those things. And sometimes it's just a good listening ear or a sounding board that will help them think things through. So that's where we usually start.
I should have asked you, describe the organization you're part of today.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So I'm part of Chief Outsiders. We are a consultancy that focuses on both fractional CMOs and fractional chief sales officers, CSOs. And we help mid-market small enterprise organizations really unstick from a growth strategy perspective, whether they don't have a strategy in place and need one and need help executing that. They lost their marketing leader or sales leader, we can step in and keep them going, or really just being able to help them put that strategy together. A lot of mid-market organizations don't have a strategy. They're somewhat winging it, and we really are able to step in and do that. Part of the reason for that, and not to make this an advertisement for Chief Outsiders, is every one of the Chief Outsiders has sat in that C-suite role at one point, whether it's for a mid-market organization or an enterprise organization. You can't come in as a marketing manager, marketing director, and join Chief Outsiders. So we've kind of worn the badge, sat in the seat, and have the battle scars to prove it.
That's excellent because, and this is a personal dig right now, I feel like the environment that we're in is littered with people with the CXO title. They end one opportunity, perhaps working in a W-2 role where they were perhaps there for an extended period of time, and now they're in transition. And they go, oh, I'll be a fractional CXO with really no true qualification or standard to follow. Maybe that's an opportunity, but Chief Outsiders has actually created that. And for the buyer, for the interested leader who wants to find a resource like Chief Outsiders, you have a qualification process.
We do. And again, not to make this an advertisement, but the key difference in some of the folks that you're talking about, they can be great marketers. The difference between them and what Chief Outsiders brings is we've had a seat at the executive table, and we almost require a seat at the executive table with our customers because that's where we can really make the difference. There's a lot of great marketers out there, and I consider myself a great marketer, but there's more that I bring to the table than just great marketing. I am that executive, been there, sat the seat, gone through strategy, gone through other issues, and help organizations with their organizational maturity. And somebody that sat at the director of marketing level, as an example, just doesn't have that kind of experience. They might still be a great marketer, but that's what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, I'm going to go off script here for a little bit and kind of dive into this with you. I want to talk about the fractional environment because what I found in my own fractional experience was that around me are people who held the executive role. Oftentimes, a small to medium sized business, they're turning to fractional executives because they're looking for an all in one solution, which could be right or wrong, right? But I find that people who come out of these executive roles where they were spinning dials and managing the business at their leadership level, when they're asked to now perform more of the frontline type of work that supports a sales strategy, supports a marketing strategy, right? They're asked to do everything in that process. They sometimes struggle with that, and you're shaking your head.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes every engagement's different. But what we do as chief outsiders, and what I do specifically, I grew up on a cattle ranch, so work ethic was I don't want to say beat into me at an early age because my folks did not do that. But you just rolled your sleeves up and got work done. I approach every engagement of I'm going to be a worker. I'm not just a strategist up here and go tell everybody what to do. And in many instances, that makes me a better marketer because I am doing the work. In some instances, though, you really have to say, William, that's not the best use of your time, where there's other resources that are probably going to be more efficient, better at it, and you focus on X, and let's bring in some tactical resources to really help execute.
Right.
And it's just knowing when to do that that makes all the difference in the world. I'm willing to get my hands dirty, but there's many times I go, that's not the best use of my time. I'm going to focus over here and let me bring in a writer or a performance marketer type person.
For the audience that's listening to this, you may have heard him mention farming and cattle. I do want to state that William is from the state of Montana. So I think, William, you're the first guest that I've ever had on here that can claim to be from the state of Montana.
There's only a few of us, so
And you currently reside in Dallas, Texas,
I
correct?
do. Yeah, I've been in Dallas for a while.
Fantastic. So what originally led you into this leadership development work?
Yeah, it's I'm a marketer at heart. I'm a marketer by education, marketer by every job that I've had has always had a portion of marketing in it. Even if I was carrying a sales bag, I had to be a marketer. I've done product marketing, I've been strategy, vertical strategy. I've sat in the role of, true CMO of demand gen and brand building. And every time, and as I progressed in my career, it's more than just your craft. You have to be able to read the room, understand data, understand what's happening within the organization, what's happening outside the organization to provide the most value in the role that you're playing. Again, there's a lot of great marketers that are out there. And the difference is you need to be a great marketer and you need to have these three or four other skills that really make you a great leader and a value to the organization that's hiring you, whether that's full-time or a fractional. And that's where I have to focus because again, there's lots of great marketers out there. I am a great marketer, but I got to bring those other things to the table in order to provide the real value.
When you see a leadership team struggling with communication or alignment, where do you begin?
There's a couple things that I think of. One is you can't just, especially as a fractional, as a consultant, right? You can't just walk in and start swinging a heavy stick. You have to say, let me go fix my area of responsibility first. That will also help me understand some of the interactions with the other departments and understand what's happening. I'm going to get that in a good place. And then I've built that trust and I've built the right to start asking questions about other parts of the organization, especially as they affect the marketing or sales role. And then that allows us to really open up those conversations and say, hey, Joe from operations, when this is happening, here's how it's affecting others within the organization and specifically marketing. Can we talk about that? And once you've earned that trust and you've gotten your group in a good place, you've kind of earned the right to have some of those conversations. You can't just walk in and start throwing discs at people. You got to make sure that you have really dug in and understand what's really happening there. And then you have to be selective, right? Nobody likes to have somebody tell them that their organization is terrible or that they're not performing or here's all the things that are wrong. You really have to be surgical in saying, how can we point out the things that are going to have the most impact and not just go try to boil the ocean and fix everything?
It's the perfect segue to this next question. You bring a blend of psychology and business insight to your coaching. How do those perspectives influence each other?
You know, and I think the best coaches are the ones that have the battle scars of doing things wrong, right? A coach that's perfect and has never done anything wrong probably isn't the best coach. And so I look back on my career and am able to point to the things that I could have thought through differently, could have done differently, and I bring that to the table, right? And so some of that is just reflection on different situations, whether they were good or bad, and how I can bring that to the table for this conversation with this CEO or this engagement. And so it's a combination of relying on experience and expertise, but that experience and expertise is rooted in all of the experiences that we have, physically, mentally, emotionally. And you can't just bring all that baggage in, and it's not about me, but I think that experience and those things that you have struggled with will help this organization, the coaching that you're doing, be much stronger because it's through a shared experience then.
So, what do high performing leaders consistently do that others tend to overlook?
And again, I think this really depends upon the organization, the maturity of that organization, and the leader itself. I think there are many instances that I find, especially as coming in as a fractional marketing and working with the sales organization, that CEO is trying to do too much, right? And just as I talk about from a marketing perspective, knowing where my strengths are, sometimes that CEO goes, well, I'm the best salesperson. I got to be in sales, or let me run marketing because, nobody else can do it type thing. And I think it's really stepping back that says, what is what is the vision? Do we have a vision? If not, let's start there. And then two is just like everybody else, making sure that they're in the right seat and the right role, because that's what they're really good at and can have the most impact. We should have that same conversation with the CEO. What are you best at that's going to help this organization reach its objectives? Is it really the best thing for you to run the sales team or run marketing? Wouldn't it be better to bring somebody in that has that expertise that frees you up to be that strategic leader? And sometimes that is the hardest conversation to have with somebody. One, there is sometimes, a lot of times limited resources. Two, it's an ego thing. Or three, they've tried those things and they've failed. And they go, well, crap, I'll just go do it myself because, Tim didn't do it very well last time when I tried that. So nobody's going to be able to do it. And you got to really be able to step back and have those conversations, again, very respectfully, based upon trust, based upon experience that says, let's try it and let's try it a different way. And those are sometimes really the hardest conversations because they're rooted in all of their experience, their emotions, their ego, and they have a lot on their shoulders and they go, I can't give it to somebody else. I just don't trust anybody. And we got to unpack that to allow them to do what they're really, really good at.
You have both a familiarity and experience with EOS, correct?
I do. Yes. Yes.
So you're describing that ownership, visionary seat, defining that seat. I'm using that word specifically because we use a tool called an accountability chart, and it's where we map out all of the seats of the leadership team and we define the roles that seat is responsible for performing. And then we assign a metric and then we finally assign a name. So from your perspective, and you're shaking your head in affirmation here, defining that seat is really, really important and really perhaps enables the rest of the team to get clarity and understanding of what the responsibilities are and what they need to prioritize.
Yeah. And sometimes, and I do like the EOS framework because it allows you to have those conversations with a methodology that just makes sense. a lot of times that visionary role isn't well defined because it's assumed that the CEO is going to be visionary. And what happens is when they're playing some of these other roles and they're putting their fingers and stuff, we haven't defined that and pushed them back up into that role so they can actually play that visionary. I also think that from an EOS perspective, maybe even need to take it once we've defined those key leadership seats, is be able to unpack it even more and go down and, from a marketing perspective, as an example, really be able to say, what does this mean? It's one thing to say you own marketing, but what are the things that you own? And we do that through big rocks and all those types of things. I think there's an opportunity to be able to unpack that even at that next level a little bit more. But it's making sure that you have great definition of those roles and really hold people accountable to play those roles and play them effectively, and not, it's not that they can't get out of their lane. It's just that let's make sure they're doing their role before they start messing with everybody else's, as an example.
Completely agree with you. And thinking about that accountability chart, defining the whole organization actually brings clarity to everybody in their seat. And I often will pose this because I was a customer of EOS at one point before becoming an implementer. The question I always ask rhetorically is, what are you willing to pay for? So when you map out a structure for your business, what we're saying is this is what's going to help you achieve your 1-year plan, your 3-year picture, your 10-year vision. This is going to get you there. These are the resources that you need, and this is what they're going to do. This is setting the expectation. And whether you use that for onboarding people into the business, you use it for reinforcement, you use it for modification, for improving process, all the rest, I can go on and on. That accountability chart will help guide you to the right structure as you go through your journey and achieving your visions. I'm glad you brought that up and shared that.
Yeah. I think one other thing, if I might, Jim, is a lot of times an organization will say, well, I have these 4 or 5 people already in place. Now let me figure out what box I can put them in. And they might not be the right resource, the right person to fit in that box. And we see this sometimes, not all the time. We see this with a marketing role or a sales role, marketing more specifically, like marketing reports to the CFO, right? Is the CFO the right person to really lead marketing? Yes, they're writing the checks, but let's make sure that let's define the roles and let's make sure we have the right people versus just going, well, we got a blank box there. Let's go ahead and put Joe in there, right? And so we have to be able to do that effectively, and that's going to help us set those organizations up for success.
I've seen this time and time again where mapping this out on a dry erase board and taking out the markers and building the accountability chart, that visual is so powerful for people because
It is.
exactly what you just said, you start to see people getting the alignment in their heads of what's going to work. Or if the problem exists, we're going to now address that problem, create the issue, and decide how we want to solve that. And the accountability chart is such an effective tool for that very purpose. And I always think of it, it's not an org chart. It's really what's the structure it's going to lead us to our vision. And again, what are you willing to pay for as either a business owner and or a team leader? What's going to help you get to where you got to go?
I do the same thing with the marketing organization. I call it a functional org chart, right? Functional marketing org chart. I take all the names of the people off the table and say, what are the functions that a great marketing organization needs to cover? And then we go, how are we going to do that? Because those functions are really important. And then we can take a look at who do we have internally? Who do we need to bring in from an agency? Who do we need to bring in from a freelancer or a contractor? But having that clarity of the roles that are needed to be successful before you start putting people in there is really powerful.
Yes. And then you brought up a different subject, which was you've got somebody who perhaps has been with you for whatever period of time. He or she, we like them, they fit our culture, but are they in the right seat? Does does that person get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do that role? Sometimes because of these attributes, longevity, for example, or tenure, we go, oh, well, Sue does this, so we're just going to keep her over there for now, but she's not getting the job done, or perhaps doesn't understand that role. and is not suited for that role, we got to figure out what to do with Sue at that point. And if you can afford another seat for her, let's define what her role is going to be and create that clarity. Second to that is perhaps you've got the right person. Let me say it this way. You have the wrong person, I should say, in the right seat. So we'll use the CFO example. CFO comes on board, he or she could have all the credentials and all the experience in the world, but they don't ascribe to the values of the organization, what you define to be your core values. That's just toxin right there. And I as an implementer would encourage any business owner, any leadership team, you got to have that hard conversation and decide that person's not a fit for our organization. They're holding us back. We got to make a change. And that's where an implementer can be very, very useful to help guide that conversation.
And those are hard conversations, especially if the organization's been fairly tenured, to your point, and there are relationships there that are hard to break, right? And it's sometimes that's so emotional. It's like, well, we can't let Susie go because she's been here for 15 years.
Right.
But you're not serving the organization, you're not serving Susie, and you're not necessarily serving the rest of the team by keeping her in a role or in the organization. We always got to treat people with empathy and respect and make sure that they're taken care of. But a lot of times you're going to unlock that value if you go, Susie, we love you. Here, here's what we want you to do going forward, or here's a great package to exit. And what you do is you unlock that growth because Susie, not because she's a bad person, was inhibiting that growth for whatever reason that was, right? And unlocking that is really, really important.
Let me put a footnote and clarification for anyone listening. When I said I can help you with that conversation, I'm talking about the conversation amongst the leadership team
Yes. Yeah.
and what our next steps will be. The conversation one-on-one should be with the business leader and perhaps human resources to have that conversation with the employee. So
Yeah.
I'm not implying that
Absolutely.
the implementer
Absolutely.
would do that. You
Yeah.
and I are on the same page.
Yeah.
Great. So tell me, what are some of the early signs that a team to you is drifting off course?
Yeah. I have walked into so many organizations when I'll keep it to marketing. I'll keep in my lane to a certain extent is they don't know they're off course because they don't know what the direction of the course is, right? They don't know what the objectives are. I mean, and I get it, right? In a small organization, executive team likes to keep things very close to their chest, but you got to let the team know what the revenue objective is, what it's going to take to get there, what are the expectations. And a lot of times they go, William, this is the first I've ever heard what our revenue goal is. And how, from a marketing organization perspective, can you really make impact if you don't know what that goal is? Because then you can break that down of, well, how many leads do we need? And how do we need to do this, right? And so I think making sure that people know what direction we're going and what those objectives are is really first and foremost. And then you can start thinking about, if you know that, then your metrics can really be aligned to growing the business. A lot of times what I see is there are some quote unquote vanity metrics or KPIs or OKRs or big rocks or whatever the term you want to use lower down in the organization that have nothing to do with us being successful as an organization. They're all, well, let's go ahead and create, yes, or excuse me, some webinars as an example, right? But what is our goal for those webinars? Do we get 20 people per, right? And what's our follow-up strategy? Those types of things. And I think that what happens is once you can start doing that, then that drifting is less because people can self-course correct because they know where they're going. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they can't. And then that's when you got to step in and you go, this isn't working, or we got to change exactly how we're doing this. But really, knowledge is so important.
You hit it on the head. One of the tools we use with EOS is what we call a vision traction organizer. It's 8 questions that help to define, for lack of better words, a playbook for the entire organization. We start with the leadership team, and everyone collaborates, contributes, and helps in the definition. These 8 things include core values, your core focus, your 10-year vision, your marketing strategy, your 3-year picture, your 1-year plan, which are your 90-day objectives, and an issues list. And when we define those 8 elements, it does provide clarity. And you said it yourself, where you talked about who you are, where you're going, how you're going to get there. When I work with teams and they're looking to go and learn and master the tools of EOS, it's the first time we're defining roles and responsibilities. There's a discovery going on in many instances that people either assumed or had no idea. William, you do this job. Jim, you do that job. I didn't know you did that. I didn't know that was your responsibility. I thought that so and so did that, right? And those discoveries really bind everyone together. It puts everybody on the same level, puts everybody on the same page, actually. And it doesn't matter what your background is, where you come from, what you do, man, woman, black, white, doesn't matter. Everybody's in there on the same operating system. And it really transforms a team when you can create that definition. And that same VTO, Vision Traction Organizer, is part of what we use to share updates with an organization. So if you're the owner of a 50-person company, I encourage you to do regular meetings with your team, with your company. You share that VTO or elements of it and
Uh-huh.
educate everybody and reinforce who you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. And bringing that clarity to everybody, now they understand what their contribution is to the business. They understand what the responsibility is and why it matters. And as long as it matters to people, people will get on your side and produce what you expect of them when you provide that clarity.
Great, 100%. Absolutely.
So, you've also helped leaders navigate burnout. What contributes most to that state, and how do you help leaders recover direction in their business?
It really goes to how do we take things off of a leader's plate that are, again, not as valuable or not as impactful, that are just weighing them down. I think that's number one. Number two is giving them, again, I say that the CEO sometimes is the loneliest position in the world. They have to be seen as this strong leader, and even if they have a strong leadership team, sometimes they can't build those personal, emotional relationships with them and feel like they can share some of the things that they're struggling with. And that's where sometimes a trusted leader, a fractional CMO, and not that I go in there and I'm their therapist by any means, but if I build that trust, what I found is they're willing to say, William, I'm thinking through something here. I'm not ready to share it with the rest of the team. And I want to run it by you, right? And it just allows them to think things through a little bit more, articulate what they're thinking, and really lay it out. And then instead of me going, well, that's a stupid idea, I can ask some questions, and they can be a little bit vulnerable in that instance. Again, it's not a therapy session, but really allowing them to say, here's what I'm thinking. And then from my experience, be able to say, hey, here's an example of somebody else that did that. Or, hey, we might want to think how we position this before you take it to the rest of your executive team. They might, you know, they might respond this way because they feel like, you're attacking them or whatever those things are. And so just having that ability to have an outlet there. The other thing is I belong to Vistage Trusted Advisor Group. And, there are some Vistage CEO groups. And when CEOs and other executive leaders need a peer group, those are really good peer groups. And this is not an advertisement for Vistage, but where they can talk to other people that are sitting in that same seat in a trusted environment. It's all confidential. It allows them to go, wow, I'm not alone. There's 10 other organizations that are struggling with certain things there. So a lot of times it's somebody just needs a support structure. They need somebody to listen to them, not judge them, not go, oh my God, we're going to the ship is sinking because the CEO has some doubts or questions or whatever. Love to be able to be that trusted advisor after I've earned that trust.
Okay, I'll get you out of here on this last question. What advice do you offer leaders stepping into their first executive role?
I think there's three things. One is be yourself, remember what got you to that role, both from a values perspective, from a heart perspective, and from a emotional intelligence perspective. So remember who you are and bring that. Now, you may need to tweak some of those things, right, in how you communicate and how you do those, but bring yourself to the table. That's number one. Number two is, don't come in similar to me as coming in as a marketing consultant. Don't come in swinging a big stick. Well, I got to go make an impact. I got to move things. Now, you got to move fast. But listen, go on the listening tours and really listen, not just to that first line, go down one level or go down two levels. If you have multiple offices, make sure you're in those offices and really listen and ask those questions. You'll learn a lot in those first 30, 60, 90 days that will help inform what direction you need to take the organization and what changes you need to make. And then I think the other thing is, know what you're good at and make sure that you're surrounding yourself or putting in the right people in the right seats to move your vision forward. You can't do it all. I know you're good at XYZ, but maybe there's somebody else that could do that role even better and free you up to be the CEO or that. So those are kind of maybe three things initially that I would say to a new leader.
Three outstanding elements of advice, and you actually swerved into something I love, what we call in EOS, delegate and elevate, defining what it is you do. And it's a 4-quadrant mapping of all the things you do. What are you really good at doing and love doing? What are you good at doing and have to do? And there's a couple others that like you have to do them and you're horrible at them, and you have to do them and you don't like doing it, right? So being able to map that out and have clarity into what you can now hand off to others and use as an opportunity to elevate members of your team can have a profound effect and help you achieve not only a reduced workload, but set you so that you can do the things you're great at doing, and better yet, get more out of your team and help your company advance and achieve its vision.
Yes.
Well, William, this has been a very thoughtful conversation. You've shown how clarity, intentional leadership, and honest reflection can change the trajectory of a team. Your work helps leaders operate with strength and presence instead of stress and confusion. For listeners who want to learn more, you can connect with William Reagan on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining me today, and thanks to everyone for listening and being part of the Growth Ceilings community. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and keep breaking through. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
You've been watching the Growth Ceilings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to grow.